Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
Stephen, welcome back.
Greetings, sir. Thank you very much for having me on.
Welcome to the program. Did you know that you would have probably the most viral post on Earth? Did you know that you'd ratio Nancy Pelosi yesterday?
I suspected it was going to get some attention. I had responded to a post of hers a couple of weeks back that got some similar attention. And again, my goal isn't to get into a public argument with the former speaker. My goal is to set the record straight. American people, and I think judging by the response that it's seeing and the fact it's gone viral, the American people want to know the truth, and they're not getting it from her.
So please, if you would, I could read it live on air. I'd rather you actually explain what happened on the day of January 6th, given the fact that Nancy Pelosi has decided to use Trump's deployment of the National Guard as an attack vector. I think that's not a smart strategy given Pelosi's history. Could you please explain that history with Nancy?
Yes, let me take you back to a couple of days before January 6th. Take you back to Sunday, January 3rd. It was the first day of the new Congress. They're all being sworn in. That was the day I went over specifically to see both the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms to request the use of the National Guard to help support my perimeter. Again, a lot of people don't realize National Guard can't come up to Capitol Hill, and I cannot bring National Guard up to Capitol Hill without approval of the Capitol Police Board. It's actually by law, it's 2 U.S. 1970. The Capitol Police Board has to make the request. But I went to the two Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving, who's the House Sergeant at Arms, works specifically directly for Nancy Pelosi, and the Senate Sergeant at Arms, which was Mike Stinger at the time, who worked for McConnell. Went to see them in person to request National Guard support to help support my perimeter. I had 273 officers to support the perimeter during a joint session of Congress. All I wanted was unarmed National Guard to help maintain the perimeter. A fence line is no good if you don't have people behind it. Went up to see Paul Irving. I have my exact times. I've turned over all my video transcripts on my phone records, have my exact times. It was the morning, Sunday morning, approximately 9:35. Went over to see Paul Irving and was denied. Was denied bringing in federal resources, specifically because he was concerned about the optics of having National Guard on Capitol grounds. He then referred me over to Mike Stinger, who is the now the chairman of the Capitol Police Board, the Senate Sergeant at Arms. Went over immediately to see him. He wasn't in. I came back approximately 11:40 to see him again. As soon as I came walking in and started asking for the use of the National Guard, he already had a denial queued up. He wouldn't allow me to bring in the National Guard. Later, he told me that Paul Irving had come up and told him that Sund was coming to request the National Guard, and they had to come up with another idea because he was believed he'd never get that by Pelosi. So Sunday, I'm denied. I go back to my office. A call comes in to the office to one of my deputy chiefs from Carol Corbin. She's the program manager at the Pentagon that handles what they call DSCA, the Defense Support for Civil Authorities, calling over to offer National Guard, asking, are we going to be requesting National Guard? So by law, I've been denied the use, so I have to decline the offer of National Guard. So now fast forward to January 6th, we have the riot began at the Capitol, 12:53 p.m.
If I may, I hate interrupting. I just want to establish very quickly, because there was a lot of information, data, and fact patterns there, and names that people may not be familiar with. To boil it all down, you begged Nancy Pelosi's leadership structure for National Guard protection days before January 6th.
Correct.
And you have a record of that, and Nancy Pelosi's leadership structure and enforcement structure, security enforcement structure, told you flatly, no, this is going to look bad we don't like the look of it or whatever, and no.
100% correct. I was denied twice. Specifically, they would not approve the request, specifically concerned over optics. You are absolutely right. And again, I'm required by federal law to seek that approval. So without it, I cannot request any federal assistance or National Guard.
Forgive my interruption. Please continue.
No worries whatsoever. There's a lot of information, but I will tell you this: I'm a cop. I've been a cop for 30 years. I know my facts. I keep my facts, and I keep my records. And I've turned over everything since I first started to push to testify in February of 2021. So fast forward to January 6th, 12:53. We're in the command center. The riot begins to happen on our west front. We're seeing my officers, which I knew that was concerned they were going to be outnumbered, start to be overrun. Immediately 12:58, I call Paul Irving. I first called MPD for some assistance, then called Paul Irving and asked him at 12:58 p.m. specifically, we are getting overrun on the West Capitol. I need approval to bring in federal resources and the National Guard now, immediately. And what people don't realize, when I'm sitting in the command center, sitting right behind me are representatives from the Capitol Police Board. So Paul Irving's representative sitting right behind me and seeing exactly what I'm seeing on the video screens in the command center. He says to me specifically, I will never forget this as long as I live. Let me run it up the chain and I will get right back to you. I was dumbfounded hearing that. So hang up the phone. He's running up the chain. I'm seeing what's going on. I think this is getting really bad. My officers are getting their rear ends handed to them. I called Mike Stenger, and he's the Senate Sergeant Arms. And I said, Mr. Stenger, I need approval to bring in National Guard assistance. Because still, even during emergency, I'm required to get this permission. He said, have you talked to Paul Irving? And I said, yes, I have. He's running up the chain. He goes, let's wait to hear from Paul Irving. We made 11 phone calls over the next 71 minutes before I finally received approval at 2:09 p.m. Do you have any idea how long it took that group to fight its way up to the Capitol, break the first window of the Capitol, and enter into the building?
It was multiple hours.
It took 81 minutes. 81 minutes for them to do it. For 71 of those minutes, I was repeatedly denied bringing in federal resources.
So when you were denied that resource that you had been requesting now for days, so now we have days of you requesting the National Guard get brought in, Nancy Pelosi retaliated against you personally because you were the one trying to protect the Capitol that day, which is a very interesting tactic. Nancy Pelosi has attacked you. Is that correct? For telling the truth about that day? That
is correct. And I'll tell you, when I couldn't get approval to bring in the federal resources, I started calling every chief of police I knew in the area, just asking for them to send me anybody they could. And thank God they did. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. Within 24 hours of us, resecuring the Capitol, them getting in and certifying the vote, Speaker Pelosi goes on national TV and singles me out by name as the person at the head of the Capitol Police that allowed this to happen. Demands my resignation, and literally lies to the American people, saying he's never even called me since this occurred. I spoke to her 3 times. One time with the Vice President of the United States being present. Spoke to her 3 times. So yes, she singled me out. Sad to say, I'm one of several stories of whistleblowers being targeted, and other people. But yeah, she singled me out, forced my resignation. I was a 30-year law enforcement career. Forced my resignation, stripped me of my retirement, and off I went.
And you haven't had that restored, even though you've been exonerated by Congress and by history, because Stephen, we've had now documents from Kash Patel from the Pentagon. We've seen the documents from Muriel Bowser denying the National Guard in Washington, D.C., right? The same thing with Pelosi's office. All of the facts and all of the actual documentation back up your story and prove that nobody in Washington, D.C., who was in charge that day, allowed President Trump to bring in the National Guard, that it was the president trying to bring the National Guard in before January 6th.
I appreciate you asking that. And what's interesting is they identified the number one fatal flaw. It was the law, 2 U.S. 1970, and they changed that law. They changed that law in December of 2021, 11 months after January 6th. They changed it and now allow the chief of police the authority to call in federal resources unilaterally in an emergency. You would have thought that would have been a nice clue to say, hey, maybe we need to look back at what Chief Sund went through. But I'm just glad that, finally, and I fought to testify. The January 6th Select Committee wouldn't even let me come in and testify in public. You can probably guess why. But went before Chairman Loudermilk's January 6th Committee. I've testified a couple times there. And you're absolutely right. December 17th, in a bipartisan report from that committee, they exonerated me on page 1. So, I'm working with the committee. I'm working with Barry Loudermilk to see what can be done to correct what I've suffered. But like I said, there's, I'm one of a few stories.
Yeah. What would you like to see done? You should get your pension back. Obviously, you should serve actually on the new task force, since you were seemingly the one guy who wanted to protect Washington, D.C. and protect the Capitol. And I think everybody who's a patriot wanted the National Guard there that day, including the President of the United States, because nobody wanted bad actors to do bad things. We know as a matter of fact that Antifa members and BLM members playing MAGA supporters wearing red hats in order to we know that because they've been criminally charged and are doing federal sentences now for the crimes they committed that day. And they were usurping the movement. They had snuck in and were trying to sow discord. Anyway, the point is that the National Guard being there that day would have, I think, by and large, prevented anything from happening and would have stopped one of the greatest scams, I think, and disinformation's pulled ever on the American public. That being said, what would you like to say? Sorry, this
no.
Still gets me upset to this day. What would you like to see done, Stephen?
And there's so many things we could talk about with this. So I'll tell you this. Yeah. When you look at it, and Congress actually, one of their reports even said, had the House and Senate Sergeant Arms approved Chief Sund's request, the breach of the Capitol most likely would have never happened. That's Congress's own report. So think about that. For me, it's just correcting the injustice. Again, I fought to prevent it in advance. I fought to prevent it while it was happening. It'd be nice for them to, somehow, try and prevent correct the injustice that occurred. And, I have 30 years of law enforcement, a little over 25 with the Washington, D.C. police, worked patrolling their streets for many, many years before coming up here at the nation's capital, where I was the chief of police for only 18 months before January 6th. Love law enforcement, love the men and women of the department, talk to them regularly. Would love to, somehow support it, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what support I get. And it'd be nice to have OMB review the situation. Maybe they can come up with a solution, but we'll see.
Well, we're broadcasting from the White House, Stephen. Maybe I'll just go upstairs, and just start knocking on doors.
there you go. You're in the place to make things happen. But again, I greatly appreciate you asking about that. But again, what I've said from day one, January 6th was preventable. Didn't have to happen, and it could have easily been prevented.
Yes. Would you serve on any type of Protect DC administration? Would you volunteer your services if the president asked to come back and help perhaps adjudicate some of the problems here?
I'd be happy to assist in any way I'm asked to assist, advisory, whatever, however it is. I love law enforcement. I think the men and women, I still think it's an honorable and noble career. It's just they're facing a tough road. And I think when you look at Washington, D.C., having patrolled, I was there during the height of the homicides in 1991 in Washington, D.C. Everyone's using these crime statistics. No matter how you cut it, D.C. has a homicide rate that's probably 5-6 times that of any big city in the United States of America. That is unacceptable for this nation's capital. And you saw the ABC reporter talking earlier. People don't feel safe on the street. And you need to be able to feel safe in the nation's capital. Yeah.
Just a quick comment here, Stephen, to some of those who are saying, no, D.C. is safe. Crime's down. I've never seen crime in D.C., given your background.
All you have to do is walk around. When you see off-duty police officers having to work in every grocery store, when you see them in front of community centers, when you see armed security around ATMs, that tells you it's not a safe area. People don't feel safe. The community, if they felt safe, you would be hearing about it. They don't feel safe.
Well, we deeply appreciate you ratioing Nancy Pelosi. We deeply appreciate, again, you're just a straight shooter. You're just telling the facts as they are. Yep. I think it's incredibly ironic now that Nancy Pelosi is attacking the National Guard being deployed here. Maybe we could just end on this because you bring it up in your viral post. I want to pop it back up on screen so that everybody can come here, reshare it, repost it, follow Stephen Sund. But you bring something up that I think is pretty remarkable here. And you note that Nancy Pelosi was thrilled to have the National Guard live in D.C., surround the Capitol with concertina wire, and turn it into a total militarized installation for Joe Biden's installation, right, as president. And you note that it's kind of it really smacks of such blight and a real humiliation that she's willing to lock down the Capitol after January 6th and turn it effectively into a no-go zone, a military no-go zone, when she refused to lift a finger before January 6th.
That is correct. It comes down to some very ironic imagery, and I think that's what it was. I've been down there when we've put up anti-scale fence before. I've never seen 2 rows of anti-scale fence, especially with concertina wire. Again, I repeatedly asked, I was repeatedly denied, and then the next day they're bringing in tens of thousands of armed National Guard and 2 rows of fencing. It was, I think, a big image issue.
Yeah. Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, compensating for something.
Now, they didn't want the optics before, and then they wanted the optics.
Ladies and gentlemen, his viral post is still cooking. He's made a lot of international news, and he's joined our show, and we're thankful for him as a friend, and we look forward to telling his story and hopefully seeing him reinstalled here in Washington, D.C. as somebody who can actually bring law and order. The great Capitol Police Chief, former Stephen Sund. Everyone go follow right here. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, sir. Take care, Benny.